Many of you will be very pleased, relieved perhaps, to hear that the Johnny Depp Amber Heard saga seems to have finally come to an end, with a statement by Amber Heard on Instagram announcing a settlement between the two for just $1 million to be paid by the insurance company. Her announcement on Instagram reads, "After a great deal of deliberation, I've made a very difficult decision to settle the defamation case brought against me by my ex-husband in Virginia. It's important for me to say that I never chose this. I defended my truth, and in doing so, my life as I knew it was destroyed. The vilification I've faced on social media is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized when they come forward. Now I finally have an opportunity to emancipate myself from something I attempted to leave over 6 years ago, and on terms I can agree to." So just pausing there seem to be actually very few terms to this agreement, in that there don't seem to be any restrictions about what she can say. She goes on to say, "I've made no admission. This is not an act of concession. There are no restrictions or gags with respect to my voice moving forward. I make this decision having lost faith in the American legal system, where my unprotected testimony served as entertainment and social media fodder." It goes on to say, "When I stood before a judge in the UK, I was vindicated by a robust, impartial and fair system, where I was protected from having to give the worst moments of my testimony in front of the world's media." But again, just pausing there is, in my view, somewhat an admission within these very words themselves. She says she was protected from having to give the worst moments of the testimony in front of the world's media. If you recall from my analysis of the original UK trial, that was because she was not a party to the proceedings in the UK trial. Therefore, she was not subject to the same disclosure rules that other parties would be if they are party to a claim. Therefore, in the judge's words, she was allowed essentially to choose what evidence she gave and when that she gave it. And so when she says in her words she was protected from having to give the worst moments of her testimony in the UK trial, that suggests to me that she's aware that some of it, the worst bits in her words, were protected, in her words, from coming forward in the trial in the UK. So where she is again talking about the UK trial as though it found in her favour, remembering that she was not a party, this statement here does quite clearly set out that she's aware that the worst bits were excluded from the UK trial. She goes on to say, "In the US, however, I exhausted almost all my resources in advance of and during the trial, in which I was subjected to a courtroom in which abundant, direct evidence that corroborated my testimony was excluded, and in which popularity and power mattered more than the reason and due process." Now again, she's referring to evidence that was excluded, but you'll remember from previous videos that such evidence was excluded on the basis of it being hearsay, such as the therapist notes. Lots of people have talked about these therapist notes as to what she said to the therapist as being evidence of what did or did not happen. Now, the fact that they are hearsay means that they are less reliable. And even if they were admitted, they were only evidence of what she said to the therapist, which is not the same as it being evidence of that the thing happened at all. One other way of describing those would be previous consistent statements, which are not automatically admissible. And even when they are hearsay and automatically less reliable. But nonetheless, they were only evidence of what she said to the therapist, not evidence of what did or did not happen. She goes on to say, "Even if my US appeal is successful, the best outcome would be a retrial where a new jury would have to consider the evidence again. I simply cannot go through that for a third time." Now, you remember from my video just recently that I don't think that would happen anyway. I think that the most likely result of this, that the appeal would have failed and that the court would not have ordered a retrial purely on the basis of her arguments. One of those arguments being, which I covered in a recent video, that it was inconvenient to have the trial in Virginia. Although, as I said in that video, the court ruled that because the op-ed was uploaded in Virginia, that was a good enough reason and a good enough connection with the case that the trial should be held there. So for that and many other reasons, I simply don't believe that the court was going to come anywhere near ordering a retrial with a new jury. In fact, it's my view that the likely outcome of the appeal was one of the significant factors in pushing for a settlement. She goes on to say, "Time is precious and I want to spend time productively and purposefully. For too many years I've been caged in an arduous and expensive legal process which has shown itself unable to protect me and my right to free speech." Now I have to agree that time is precious and it should be spent productively and purposefully, and litigation is long, arduous and expensive. And she goes on to say that she cannot afford to risk an impossible bill. One might argue that there's already an impossible bill. But she also references a psychological, physical and emotional bill. Now, irrespective of whether she was right or wrong, I would agree with that as well, because legal processes do take a toll psychologically, physically and emotionally, even if you are correct. Because we very often say to a prospective claimant, however much they are right, they may not like going through the full procedure. And even if they get to the very end and win, they may not feel like they've won at all because of the time and the cost and the stress involved with going through a litigation. So with all those things taken into account, I agree, it is better to settle this process than to keep having it out. Although, as I said, I do believe that the appeal would have failed and it would not have resulted in a fresh jury. According to all the news outlets, Depp and his team are yet to put out any kind of statement, but are expected to put out their own statement in response to clarify, confirm, or otherwise. So either way, and for the moment, it does seem that this saga is coming to an end. So if there is a statement put out by Johnny Depp's team, I will look at that and I will give you some thoughts on that as well. In the meantime, please do remember to like this video and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.